apart from atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, which causes heart attacks, there are so many other reasons for sudden collapses. There can be arrhythmias in the heart because of exercise. There can be diseases in the heart muscle. So many of these can get overlooked unless you get evaluated.
We have seen cases in pro cycling.
Yes.
Recently, Sagan had to undergo heart procedure.
Sonny Colbrelli also
had to give up the sport because of this.
I am Venki, a working professional in IT as well as an amateur masters athlete and a coach for endurance sports. You are listening to the Working Athlete Podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, I have a small request from you. Please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also let me know what you like and what you would like to listen to more of by commenting in the comment section on YouTube. I promise to do my best to improve with each episode and bring you the best content that helps you and me get better each day. In this episode, I talked to Dr. Arvind Bhateja on the alarming rise in sudden fatalities in the athletic community due to cardiac events in the recent times and what we can do to avoid them. It is a short conversation on an important topic for us to understand and do whatever is in our control to avoid these tragic events. Although we talked about the case of our dear friend Late Anil Kadsur, who passed away due to a cardiac condition early this year, what we talked about is not limited to his case. Dr. Arvind's insights on the topic are super helpful in understanding the underlying causes and limiting the risks. I hope this conversation helps you in understanding a bit more about this alarming trend and do your bit to take care of your own health for the sake of yourself and your loved ones. This episode is brought to you by The Bike Affair. If you are in search of a one-stop destination that caters to all your cycling needs, our today's sponsor, The Bike Affair, is the perfect place to check out. I have known the founders of The Bike Affair, Krish and Gokul, personally for nearly 15 years now. In fact, my first century ride was with Krish back in 2008. They are both exceptional human beings and entrepreneurs that believe in providing exceptional service to their customers. And it shows. With over 14 years of experience, The Bike Affair has established itself as a trusted source offering honest advice and exceptional service. They are offering a special treat for the listeners of this podcast. You can enjoy a 10% discount on your first order by using the code BikeyVenki on their website. So if you are in Hyderabad, visit their store in Kondapur, or if you are anywhere else in India, shop online by using the link thebikeaffair.com. I will leave the link in the show notes. Now, enjoy the podcast.
All right, Doc. Welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast again.
I'm back like a bad penny again.
Like a good penny. So, Doc, today I want to, talk about something that is actually concerning a lot of us, right? We have been seeing the sudden collapses of athletes that we know that they are very fit, right? But that is not stopping them from dropping suddenly. So how, and this has resulted in a mass hysteria, right? Because all of us are scared. And so what are the things that we can, first of all, why is it happening, right? And what are the things that we can do to make sure that we are not one of those, right?
That's something that's been on my mind as well, because I think this has led to a lot of concerns amongst many of us in the community, both in the running and cycling and the triathlon community. And generally, when we think about people who exercise regularly, who take part in ultra endurance, long distance runs or cycling events or triathlons, we assume that because they can do that, that they are fit and they will lead long and healthy lives. But there's more to it than that. And that is the reason why we are seeing these kind of instances. And that's what is scaring a lot of people. So let's understand that fitness does not equate to immunity against many diseases. So just because one is fit, it doesn't mean that there could be underlying heart issues. There could be many other issues that can lead to sudden collapse. So when we talk about someone who has been, we all know about a very prominent cyclist who unfortunately suddenly collapsed. It was not sudden, but it happened over a period of 2 to 3 days. And unfortunately, we lost him. And the thing that sort of came into prominence, that how could a person who is cycling 100 kilometers every day for over 3 years suddenly collapse like this? So I think there are a few nuances to this that we need to understand. One is, if this particular person was cycling 100 kilometers every day, day one when he started doing the 100 and the last 100 that he did, there would be a different physiological demand from his body on that. So obviously by the time he was doing his 100 kilometer at the end of 3 years, that would have had far less demands on his physiology, obviously, because his body would have adapted over all these days to the demand. So that 100 kilometers at the end of 3 years would not have felt that difficult for him.
Correct.
The second is, he was doing most of these rides at a very low intensity or moderate intensity over a significant duration of time during the day. So he was not obviously stressing his heart. There was no intense efforts. So if there was an underlying issue, it would not have come to light.
Right.
So these two factors need to be understood, because neither of these two factors tells us that he had an underlying heart problem. He could have had an underlying heart problem, which it turned out he did.
Right.
The third is in terms of prevention, because we have to understand that none of us is immune from these things. We have to consciously take steps to make sure that we are in good health. That can be done in a variety of ways. It can be done through cardiac evaluation. It can be done through blood work. One must also importantly understand that there are certain prominent risk factors associated with these sudden collapses. So if one has a family history of dyslipidemia, which is basically high cholesterol. We say cholesterol, but it's actually not the cholesterol that's bad. It's the LDL, the low density lipoprotein, which is the transporter for cholesterol that is bad. If there is a prominent family history of diabetes, blood pressure, cardiac disease, then one needs to be even more cautious, especially if you're beginning to enter a sport later in life, say in your 40s or your late 30s. So these are all the things that one needs to think about in a scientific, nuanced fashion, and not get into this situation where there's mass hysteria. And we also think that he suddenly passed away because of a heart attack. Apparently, these symptoms began a few hours or days before the incident actually happened, and some of these early symptoms can get either misinterpreted to mean something else. Like gastritis is a common misinterpretation. So if you were having an early sign of a heart attack and you are being treated for gastritis, obviously that's not going to help.
Correct.
So you should not neglect any subtle or early symptoms and seek immediate medical attention.
So that becomes very important. And like you said, right, these things like doing 100 every day, or people who don't understand sport tend to put that and highlight that as the main reason for everything, right? But that is not the case. Then we need to understand that the way he is doing and the way he has been going about that business, is not what caused this in any way. That maybe what we got to focus on is that being fit does not make us immune to the underlying conditions. That is the point that we have to highlight and make sure that people get regularly checked, right? Especially when when one is over 40. Those getting that blood work done, regular checkups or full body checkups, and all these become super important.
And the depth to which one has to get evaluated and the frequency depends on a lot of other factors, like your risk factors, your family history, and so on.
Right.
Also, one must understand that the causes of a cardiac disease, which is basically a heart attack, is essentially there is cholesterol deposits clogging the arteries that are supplying blood to your heart, which leads to blockages. These diseases have multiple risk factors. Being sedentary is just one of them. So by being fit and by being active, you're only removing one of the risk factors. The other risk factors can still very much play a role.
Other risk factors being?
Other risk factors being your high cholesterol, dyslipidemia. There's something called homocysteine. So a lot of Indians actually have abnormal homocysteine levels. So for example, if you have low B12, that can lead to a condition called hyperhomocystinemia, which can lead to accelerated atherosclerotic heart disease. If there's a history of smoking, sometimes genetic. And apart from atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, which causes heart attacks, there are so many other reasons for sudden collapses. There can be arrhythmias in the heart because of exercise. There can be diseases in the heart muscle. So many of these can get overlooked unless you get evaluated.
We have seen, cases in pro cycling.
Yes.
Recently, Sagan had to undergo heart procedure.
Sonny Colbrelli also
had to give up the sport because of this. So how do you? What are the things that one can do to make sure that these are detected early and?
Fortunately, those conditions are fairly rare. But if you do notice abnormal symptoms when you're putting in a hard effort, so let's say that you're putting in a hard effort, but your heart rate is not keeping up for some reason. So that could suggest that you have something like a conduction defect in the heart, or there's a heart block. So the heart is not getting enough electrical impulses, which it should, if you're putting in an intense effort. The other thing is you can have abnormal heart rhythm. So you can have an abnormally high heart rate, which can suggest an arrhythmia. There are other rare things like long QT syndrome and a whole bunch of other things which are very fortunately rare. But they can be detected on a regular ECG or a treadmill test. So if you do have any suspicion, even the slightest suspicion, it's always better to get a thorough evaluation done.
So regular ECG and treadmill tests are typically they are part of the corporate health checks.
Echocardiogram is also one.
Right?
Yeah.
So can there be cases where all of these are fine and still there are can be issues can go undetected? And
technically, yes, there can be issues. There are many things that can be metabolic. There can be structural issues, valvular issues. There can be aneurysms. A whole bunch of things can be there.
So how can one make sure that those are also kind of covered?
Fortunately, those are rare. And probably having those symptoms, having those conditions would give rise to some significant symptoms at some point, which would hopefully lead to a proper evaluation. But there are instances where it can lead to a sudden collapse and unfortunately losing a person.
Right. So we have talked about how being fit and being healthy are not one and the same, right? So let us kind of summarize what are the things that one needs to do to make sure that they are on the right path in terms of health.
Okay, that's a good question. I think it's important to make sure that your exercise program includes a variety of efforts, in the sense that strength training, if you're doing endurance activities, doing it in all zones, looking at your data to see what is happening to your heart rate when you're in zone 2, when you're in zone 4, zone 5. Because when you do that, it's like you're doing your own treadmill test. And that's far more valuable than doing it in an artificial environment in a clinic where you're walking on a treadmill. You may not be great at walking on a treadmill with a slope or
Right.
So using the data that we all get now from our cycling computers or our running watches can actually be of great use. And if you really want to dive deeper into it, there are now heart rate straps which can even give you things like an ECG and an echocardiogram. So if you do have a doubt, then maybe you should look at getting one of those and monitoring cardiac events during your activities more regularly and more carefully. Even a cardiologist can actually analyze this data for you. Apart from that, getting regular blood work. Simple things like, not missing out early diabetes, for example, because we all know that diabetes is a silent killer. It accelerates the development of atherosclerosis in the heart, and that leads to premature heart attacks. Very important is monitoring your blood pressure, something which we don't talk about enough. So many places, unfortunately, some places where you go, they check your blood pressure with an automated machine. Maybe the cuff is not the right size, not the right length for your anatomy. You can get wrong readings.
Right.
Very important to make sure that your blood pressure is being checked. It's very nuanced. So you should not ideally check the blood pressure of a person as soon as they walk into the clinic. You should give them some time to settle down, to relax, because you want to check resting blood pressure. You don't want to check blood pressure when they're agitated or have just exerted themselves. So that's a very important part of it, and it often gets missed because it's not a metric that is objectively checked. It's very subjective.
Yeah.
And then doing regular blood work, getting a panel of your lipid profile, your glycosylated hemoglobin, your homocysteine, your vitamin levels, your thyroid. These are things that often can go undetected unless one checks for them.
True. Excellent. Yeah, I think these are some of the things that kind of can help reduce that fear.
I'm very sure it should.
Yeah. Hopefully, more people will kind of focus on health aspects, not just fitness, and make sure that they are getting regular checkups, health checkups done, addressing whatever issues that are being found out through that process, and giving priority to eating right, doing all the right stuff.
Yeah, let's not forget the low-hanging fruit here, right?
Right.
Simple things like eating healthy, sleeping enough, and reducing your chronic stress. And these are things that really can't be measured very well with a blood test.
Right.
So tracking your sleep, addressing any issues that you may have with insomnia, ensuring that you eat a balanced, healthy, wholesome diet. These are all, and reducing stress, reducing chronic stress. These are all very important. And I think we don't talk about the effect of stress enough.
True. That is, stress is like a blanket that covers everything, right?
Yeah.
The stress can come in various forms. It can be work stress, that can be family issues, whatever that can weigh on your mind. And stress has like a downstream effects
On everything. Everything. Yeah.
And also not getting enough sleep.
So one of the things with stress is it elevates your cortisol levels. So normally when we wake up in the morning, we have a peak in our cortisol around 8 a.m. and then it sort of stays up, and then during the evening time it sort of reduces and it falls to its lowest level during sleep.
Right.
But if you have persistently high cortisol levels, it has so many effects on your physiology. It's unbelievable. It even has been shown to lead to early dementia
Wow.
abnormal insulin levels. So you get abnormal sugar metabolism. Your glucose metabolism is deranged. Obesity, osteoporosis, you name it.
Right.
It affects every single organ system in the body.
Stress. Now, hopefully, this won't stress people out, but you get like Doc just mentioned, right? You address the low hanging fruits, eating right, sleeping well, and increasing the sleep. Nowadays, everyone is talking about it now, but not sure how many are actually addressing that.
But I'm glad that at least it's being talked about now. People are more
That is
aware.
the starting point.
Yeah.
That awareness is everything. Everyone is talking about it, and that is the first step.
And if your viewers haven't heard about the book, you should all definitely try to read the book by Matt Walker on sleep, which is called Why We Sleep. He's one of the leading researchers on sleep in the world.
Right.
Fabulous book. I learned so many things from that book. Even, unfortunately, in medical school, medical college in India, or even overseas, sleep is not given any priority.
Right.
Nobody even talks about sleep.
Right.
I mean, I never learned anything about sleep during my medical education.
So yeah, that Why We Sleep by Matt Walker is an excellent book, and right now I think there is a series of episodes that Andrew Huberman is doing with Matt Walker.
Yeah.
We were actually listening to one of the episodes as we were driving here. We are in here in Kunur for cycling camp and recording this.
And we're helping to reduce our stress with this beautiful greenery around us.
So taking this mini retirement, as I call it, it's like 3-day retirement. But yeah, so we were actually listening to one of those episodes as we were driving here. But absolutely important to kind of focus on that sleep aspect and trying to reduce the overall stress. Don't stress about it, but try and reduce this stress because it has a huge impact on all sorts of health issues. Doc, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. And
not at all. I mean, we have time today, and it's always a pleasure being on your podcast, Venki. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doc.
That was my conversation with Dr. Arvind Bhateja. I hope you enjoyed that and found that useful. If you are enjoying these podcasts and finding them useful, please consider supporting the podcast by subscribing to it on YouTube as well as on your favorite podcasting app. It really helps. Thanks again for your continuous support. See you next week with another guest.